Okay, John Robb here, interviewing Justin Sullivan about the mighty new Model Army album. So, yeah, another chapter in an incredible longevity. I mean, how do you still manage to find any kind of inspiration?
Um, I always get asked that question. I mean, there's always things to write about. There's always musical ideas kicking about, and there's always, as a band, there's always people. As a way of writing, I always say the same thing with that. We've got these two cupboards, and into one goes musical ideas, and that can be, a bit of a jam. It can be a chord sequence, a bass line, and lots of drum beats, especially drum beats. Um, and then in the other cupboard is stuff I want to write about. So it's notebooks and a couple of lines that I wrote once, or somebody told me a story, or I've got notebooks full of stuff, and then you just sort of when the cupboards are full, which they mostly are all the time, you just start pulling ideas out and what fits with what, that chord sequence with that drum beat. What does that feel like? Well, it feels a bit like this lyrical idea. Or start with a lyrical idea. What's the kind of beat for that? It's a bit like that. You sort of piece it together. It's a bit like doing a jigsaw puzzle, and all the pieces already exist because there are all these saved ideas as you go along from everybody in the band. And so you're never kind of staring at a blank sheet of paper ever. You get stuck on an idea, you just throw it away or put it to one side. Let's try another one. And it's not so difficult. Although this album was slightly strange. We started in the summer of 21, and then we sort of put it aside because we were doing other stuff. And then we picked it up again in the spring of 22, and then we put it aside to do other stuff. And then we sort of went at the beginning of this year. It was like, right, let's get this bloody thing finished.
I mean, often when you do an album, do you just do it all in one block, all in one go? You talk about this
Yeah,
like it's
sometimes, and sometimes that's better. I mean, from here, the previous one was we started writing quite early on. We decided we were going to Norway to make it. It was very much written very fast with that in mind, as we had wanted this big backdrop. We wanted the big sound. We wanted to take a step back out of the world and write from a kind of distance in a way, looking at everything. And this one was very different in the sense. I think it's very eclectic. This one, it's got a lot of different moods and different vibes and so on. And that's because it was written at different times in our personal lives and against what's going on in the world and so on.
I mean, but by having different moods and different textures, which it is, as a listener, you can definitely detect that. Is it? Do you find it harder to make that into a more of an album, or do you see it as a snapshot of various different times, kind of put together?
It was difficult to put it in. It's definitely an album because it's got a sound. And we decided very early on that we wanted Chad to mix it, Chad Blake, who's kind of very famous, um, and we sort of wrote to his manager in California, and I don't think she'd ever heard of the band actually. And she wrote back sort of brusque letter saying, "You do realize that Chad costs this plus this plus this plus this plus," and I wrote back to her and say, "Yeah, I do," and she went, "Oh, well, then send us some demos." So I sent some demos, and I got a thing back from Chad saying, "Are these demos or are they ongoing works?" And we said, "Well, they're demos, really." And he said, "Well, I really like the demos. I don't think you need to re-record things. You just go on doing it in your own place, in your own way." And that's what we did, really. So it's got a sound. It's got we recorded it all in our own studio at different times, and then Chad did Chad things to it. And we
Which
mixed
is
it.
what
He didn't really change much. It's just that he there is this sort of top level of mixers. There's millions of people that can mix a record. There does seem to be a bit of a top level. And we've now used a few of these people: Joe Barresi, Andy Wallace, Bob Clearmountain, now Chad Blake. And it is a sort of how they find room for everything you're throwing at them is quite extraordinary, actually.
Well, do they simplify the sound, or do they just find
No, they
ways
don't.
of putting it all in
When we
there?
did Dog and Wolf, I expected Joe Barresi. We threw tons and tons of stuff and thousands of on Dog and Wolf, thousands and thousands of drums at the tape and well, computer, and assumed that he would throw half of it away and pare it down. And we thought the same with Chad Blake, that we sort of somebody had another idea, or here's another idea, or let's layer that up, and we kind of assumed that what he would do would be to throw half of it away and pare it down. But actually he didn't really. He sort of just found room for everything.
Sort of like tidying it up and put everything on the correct shelf in a way.
Kind of, yeah. But how you get, how you get this kind of wall of instrumentation, but you still get the drums to sound like someone's really hitting the drum and it comes through. That's quite extraordinary. With From Here, the last one, we went after a really, really sort of big drum sound, and we had to make space for it by keeping a lot of stuff out of the way of where the drums were going to be. This time we didn't really bother. He managed to sort of punch a hole somehow. I don't know how it's done. It's a mystery to me. He said it's not a miracle. And as far as I'm concerned, it is really.
Yeah, well, he would say that because he does it all the time, I guess, doesn't he? I mean, do you have an overarching kind of idea of the sound for each album, or is it just something that coalesces as the songs start coming out the
We
cupboards?
start writing songs. With New Malami, we've got a particular sort of way of going about the way we write and then the way we construct things, which does seem to be very different from everybody else. It's basically rock music, but with this massive emphasis on a very busy rhythm section. So the drums, Michael plays a lot of tom-tom beats. It's quite all that tribal stuff. And then the bass has always been massively important in New Model Army, and Kerry's yet another in a long list of very good bass players. They've all been different, but they've all, there's this emphasis on bass and drums that runs through everything we do. So that happens naturally. Me as a writer, I love, my first love was always Motown and then the whole Northern Soul thing in the 70s and so on. So that rhythm section, but everything's bass and drums. I mean, I always think people talk about the Clash and they talk about Joe Strummer and Mick Jones and stuff. They're missing the point. The reason the Clash were great is the reason the Who were great, and the reason Rolling Stones are great, and the reason all the great bands are great is because of the rhythm section.
Mm. Yeah, it's a foundation, and especially in that period that we talk about, where all the bands like your band appeared, the rhythm sections became really important, didn't they? It was often very much about the bass players, and I thought with this album, there was a slight sort of return, not completely, but there's a sense of that post-punk kind of feel to it. The bass was cutting through even more than usual.
Yeah, maybe that's true. I mean, Kerry was writing more on this album, I think, and he also played quite a lot of guitar as well. Actually, I mean, everybody in New Model Army, yeah, it would be it's about the New Model Army guitarist, but actually, if you listen to the albums, you'll never know who's playing. Well, if you're an expert, you might work out who's playing what part, but everybody who's ever been in the band, except for Michael Dean, has played guitar on records.
Like a guitar orchestra.
It's sort of basically whoever comes up with the best part and plays it the best plays it. It's like that.
So it's still a very democratic process. I think we talked about this before. It's like, I mean, people see you as being you're kind of the public face of it, but you're not the boss, are you?
Not really. I don't really believe in democracy in bands. I don't think we very rarely have a vote. It's a process. I'm sure you've been in a band, so you know this. It's a process of consensus. It's the person that feels strongest about something persuades the others. And sometimes that's me, but most of the time it's not actually. I mean, Michael is a very, very key person in this. And I've always had this relationship. Before Michael, I had this relationship with Robert. We're very different personalities, and we're good together.
Yeah, I mean, in what way are you different? I mean, is it one of those you kind of fill each other's gaps up, or is there overlaps?
Well, I think we love a lot of the same stuff. So, and I think we generally agree where we want to go, but how we get there is a kind of process of You know, I have a million ideas, and I need someone to bounce off to tell me which the good ideas are and which the good ideas aren't. And I'm not a good producer because I've got a I've got a big imagination for music, and sometimes I imagine that music is like what I feel it is. And it takes someone to go, well, actually, you may be feeling that, but that's not what's actually on tape. I've noticed this thing about Robert and Michael is that I think that drummers make often make good producers because from the very beginning of the process of drumming, you're basically balancing all these different sonic sonics from the top end, the cymbals and stuff, all the way to the kick, and you're balancing all these, and so you've got this idea of a balance of different sonics. I haven't really got that in the same way, and Robert was very good at that. Mike was very good at that.
So when you say you haven't got that, what's your part then? Do you hear it from the top line, the
I
melody,
imagine
or
stuff.
yeah?
I imagine stuff.
And
And
do you,
then I kind
yeah.
of know what I want and what I don't. It's like there's only one really guitar solo on the record, and that Dean played, but it's really good. I just wanted a feeling, and Dean played some stuff, and then we're going, yeah, yeah. I couldn't play it in a million years. It's a moment of magic from Dean.
So for you, it's more about capturing a feeling or an atmosphere, a
Yeah, of
song.
course. Yeah.
Mm. And that kind of has to match with the lyrics. You get to go back to the lyric cupboard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the lyric cover, there's some songs which are kind of quite eclectic, borrowing, this line and that line, and you kind of put it together into a shape. And there's some lyrics which are very straightforward. They are a story. Here's the story. I mean, think of examples. I mean, the opening track, First Summer After, was a road trip across Poland, Slovakia, in the summer of 21. 21? Yeah, 21, 22. Okay, everybody's completely muddled up about dates now. And then I Did Nothing Wrong is basically about the post office scandal. And then I sort of extended that idea about the way the modern world is being shaped by the necessity of computers. So everything has to be a one or a zero. There isn't any room for anything else other than a one and zero. This pollutes and poisons every aspect of human life in this modern world. That everything has to be a one or a zero.
That's something really clashes with you. Very much an individualistic person.
Yeah, I'm not at all a 1-0 person. I mean, you take it right at the moment. It's almost as if everybody has to pick a side of all the wars that are going on in the world. Do we have to pick a side?
Mm.
To be on the side of disgusting Israeli government, or brutalist brutalist Hamas organization. Do I want to pick a side? No. Pick a side? No. Is there a one and a zero here? No, I'm appalled by fucking everything, like everybody.
Is this something you've always felt but has been amplified in modern times, where people don't really listen anymore, do they? They tend to just shout at each other.
Like or don't like, guilty, not guilty. There's no sort of context to anything, and there is this tendency, to divide every conflict in the world into goodies and baddies. I think that, I mean, the last track on the album, we decided to finish with that track, and I kind of like it. It's like the last lyric is still some mornings I wake up singing even if I can't remember why, which is true. And they only, deserters, I don't the let the columns of the righteous pass us by. Sometimes, I'm sure you consider yourself sort of left liberal, but left sort of person. And then some things that are done in the name of your side, so to speak, or mine, appall you. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, completely know what you mean there. I mean, what is? I mean, where does a rock and roll band fit into this in 2023? You know, is it part of the debate, or is it just the cry of an individual, or is it just kind of it's
think
more than
that,
pointing this out, isn't it?
I
It's
think that what rock and roll does, or music generally, is that you kind of express ideas and feelings, and somebody hears it and go, yeah, I feel like that. And then they go to a concert, or they, they go online or something, and they find that, yeah, another X thousand people feel like that too. And that's very important for all of us, because we're all sort of increasingly isolated from each other. And when you have that sort of shared thing of going, yeah, I feel like that, even if it's not specific. And I've always sort of fought against the idea of New Model Army having a party line, or anything being specific. It's about, this is how it feels. It's like a bit like when you're 12, 13 or something, and you're first discovering music. Is the kind of time you're becoming yourself. Okay, you discover music a long time before that, but you're what you love and what you hate is the time at which you're sort of becoming yourself, and the grown-ups have explained to you the way the world works, and how everything this fits in there because of that and that, but they don't explain how the world feels. And this is when we all, as young pre-teen in a way, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, start to hear things and go, that's how it feels. And it becomes
yeah,
incredibly important to your um, to your psyche, and the sense of unity with other things that's going on, and other people, and so on, that you find.
it's more about expressing those feelings or capturing those feelings than actually, in a way, having a manifesto, isn't it? It's
Yeah, and I think that everything has to be, when you write a song, it's a moment. It's not a manifesto. It isn't a one or a zero. It's what I feel like. If you write something which is true of a moment, then it's true.
mm.
Um,
But returning to that moment 30 years later, say if you did play an old song, would you not agree with that feeling anymore, or would you deliver it in a different way?
Mostly when we play old songs, if they're songs where I'm expressing what something felt like, yeah, no, I think it's true. There aren't many songs that where I can't feel what I felt at the time. Um, but having said that, we've also written songs from points of view that we don't even agree with. You know,
As an artistic thing.
well, I remember in My People, Right or Wrong, in the early 90s, kind of during the Yugoslav war. And it's a kind of study of nationalism. Do I agree with it? No, I don't really. Sort of philosophically, do I agree with My People, Right or Wrong? No, I don't. Do I understand it? Yeah. And the same thing with a song like One of the Chosen, where I went through, when I was a teenager, I went through a few religious cults, and I remember how brilliant it feels to think, to believe that you have this kind of secret knowledge that no one else has, and how you have the light on you, and this kind of feeling of being special and being right. And so I wrote the song from that point of view, even though again philosophically I can see, that it's. And let's go back to the very beginning, Vengeance. That it is a moment. I watched a documentary about, I mean, famously, I've said this in lots of interviews. I watched a documentary about Klaus Barbie, and I wrote the song in fucking 10 minutes out in a fury.
Mm.
Do I believe in vengeance and justice? Yeah, I do. But do I also believe in forgiveness? Yeah, I do. There isn't a one or a zero here.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that probably the most powerful thing that a song in this kind of world could actually state, that you can actually hold two completely different opinions at the same time? It's actually about
Well, that's the
confusion.
difference between this is the difference between us and AI. AI can't hold two completely different opinions at the same time. We can. We all do. All of us. you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's human.
So maybe the power of songwriting is to embrace that confusion.
I think that, yeah, I think that that's it. I mean, if you look at, look at a Bob Dylan album from the very beginning, there'll be the most beautiful love song put next to a really bitchy, fucking nasty, brutal song. I mean, isn't that what it's like to be human? The Greeks had it right with their gods. Got a god for everything, all the various different aspects of being human. And that to me is sort of more logical.
I mean, is it, you talk about the religious cults before. I know you got the Quaker background. Is there sort of a innate spirituality about what you do as well? I mean, I'm not saying all your songs are about God, etc., but the way they're
Yeah, I
framed.
think so. I think that there are some things that sort of mark us as, but rock music in its roots are kind of urban, but our roots are not urban. We're all sort of country people. If you asked us, when we were doing From Here, you could say to some band, where would you most like to go and record? Somebody would say, oh, the Caribbean island or something, and some people would say New York, where it's all happening. And we chose to go off to a bleak, snowbound Norwegian island where it's completely bleak. We actually love bleak. So that sort of big, open. We all very much love, sea, desert, mountains, these kind of big, sort of open landscapes, and to do with the sort of religion. Yeah, I was brought up religious. So the idea that there is a whole other world going on, which isn't the material world, seems obvious to me. I mean, I don't have to write about it all the time or talk about it all the time or do anything about it. It just is.
In more the way you present what you do, more than actually what the thing actually is. Yeah, I mean, when you play live, you do sort of have it almost like a preacher man kind of role, the way you deliver the songs.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe that was the sort of punk rock thing. I don't know. I don't know. I always just delivered with all my heart and soul. I mean, isn't that what everybody does?
Maybe
Or
that's
meant
what
to do or something?
that's the preacher man thing, isn't it? If it's done right, it's not so much the message, but more about the delivery. I'm thinking more about the framing.
I don't really think too much about how we do it. We sort of do what we do. I mean, I try not to watch videos, although these days, everything's on YouTube forever. Um, but I don't really want to think about how we appear or even the perception of the music. I remember doing the interview in Germany for a new album. I can't remember which album. And the first question that three or four of the journalists wrote was, "How do you think the fans will receive this record?" And I thought, "Oh, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it."
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? First of all, I mean, like all of us, we're trying to make something we think is that we love. We hear it 1,000 times. If after 100 times we don't love it anymore, scrap it.
Yeah, you can't second guess your audience. I mean, I don't think the audience would even want that, would they?
No, and I think that with New Madlami, we're very lucky. We made a sort of decision in the early 90s. I mean, the early 90s we were sort of on the cusp of becoming a big band, arena band or bigger or whatever. And it never quite happened. And everybody says, oh, what went wrong? Well, I can think of a few things that we did wrong. I think partly we didn't want it, but there is the necessity to give people what they want. And we always we always had a bit of everybody that's ever been in the band has always had a little bit of this punk rock attitude. It's like, what do people want? Well, they want this. Oh, fuck them. Just a kind of instinct, a kind of instinct, and starting with Vengeance, and then 51st State, and then Vagabonds, and if any song threatened to become bigger than the band, our response was just to stop playing it. So a lot of people that wanted to hear the hits just stopped coming. But what that meant was that the audience that is coming is interested in what we're doing now. They are interested in the new stuff. Most bands, when they do a new album, or when it's the 16th album, they play 3 songs from the new album and trot out the hits. And we don't. We'll play most of the new album probably, because that's where what we're into. And we've got an audience that is a smaller audience than we might have had if we'd done the audience pleasing thing, but they'll go with us. And that's a very privileged position to be in, that we're kind of free. We do what we do what we want in the way we want when we want. And no, we're not we're not an arena or a stadium band, but we're free.
Which is the best place for an artist, gotta be, isn't it? Yeah. But also it's like a community as well, isn't it? I mean, there's like a New Model Army world, isn't it?
It is a community out there somewhere. And it's strange that everybody says, oh, you're very close to your audience. Actually, in a way, we're not. We don't do anything in order to promote this at all. Everybody's always saying, oh, you should be more present online, and you should put stuff from backstage, and you should do a tour diary, and you should put little bits of you recording the album, and you should stay close to your. We're absolutely no. We don't do any of that. We're very private. We keep ourselves very private. We're friendly enough with people that love the band, but in a way, we're very private. It's more that they're attracted, that people find the band, they find something in the band that they love, and then they have this because it's a kind of weird cult band. They have this in common with a whole group of other people stretched across the world that then makes relationships.
Yeah, their expectation of what they want from the band isn't to hang out with the band backstage. It's to actually, what the music that you create reflects a certain worldview and a musical worldview as well.
Yeah. I don't know if they necessarily want to hang out backstage. I mean, there is.
No, so saying they don't. I think
there's nothing much happening. There is a strange thing though, that around anything that's creative, that creates a kind of weird magic, which music and all art is. Everybody, it's an instinct to want to get closer to the source of that magic. You think, and therefore you think, if you can watch Van Gogh working or whatever, you can get hold of the magic, but you can't. There's just a bunch of people in a room making music. There isn't the source of the magic is somewhere else. It's not in us. We're just sort of channeling all our influences and all the things that are happening in our life and all the music we've heard and loved, and we're sort of channeling it into something that we together love.
I mean, you as a music fan yourself, did you ever think of going, round to Motown and getting to the source of the magic?
I have been to the museum. I mean, if you go to Detroit, it's probably about the only thing in Detroit worth seeing. The Motown Museum is an amazing place to go. Well, if you're an aficionado like me.
Did you feel like you got close to the magic, or was it just primarily just interested because it was
just interest, actually? It was just interest. No, I don't think getting close to the magic is everywhere, permanently everywhere. And it isn't, but it just doesn't lie in the process. The process is interesting, but the process isn't the magic. The magic is in all of us. It's in our souls and spirits, and
I mean, saying that, sometimes you feel like an outsider. I mean, in this process as well, when you're creating in the band in a room, there's a few chords, and suddenly it turns into something, and the magic appears, and you kind of go, "Whoa, where did that come from?"
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, there's a bit of that.
I mean, I don't think anybody owns.
Sorry, go on.
I don't think anybody kind of owns the magic. It's just a weird confluence at a certain moment of time, and it just happens, and everyone goes, "Wow, yeah."
It is like that, and it is to do with combinations of people. Working completely alone, I find I'm useless at it, really. I find it very difficult. I have to have people around me.
Mm.
It has to be a kind of collaboration for me.
I mean, when you said the album was, you was sort of like doing another project at the same time, which gave you breaks in making the album. So doing the orchestra version of the songs, did that change the creative process for this album? Did you think, wow, do you think maybe should we go a bit more widescreen like this is? I mean, there's a track on the album, which is a great track, which got a choir on it and a fantastic choir part on it. Or was that just happening anyway? Was that part of the process of making this album?
Actually, the opposite. When we started writing the album, and especially after the Symphonia thing, we thought, and perhaps being a four-piece again, that we thought, no, let's make it very simple rock and roll. Let's not do the orchestra thing. As it turns out, there is a bit of other stuff on the album. The choir one was a sort of. I got really interested in the whole sacred harp. This style of singing, which is basically there's a whole network across the world, but it's basically American. It's white. It's the equivalent of white gospel. There is a songbook, and there's about 400 hymns in it, all of which were written like 200-300 years ago, and they were written out in 4-part harmonies, and it's all those, I can't remember what it's called, music people would know. Sort of European, mid-European harmony structure. And they're all for these churches in America where there was no organ, no piano. They're just to be sung. And this movement goes on. And the principle, I went to a gathering in Sheffield, and the principle is you go in there, you read it, and you pick any part of the harmony you want, and you sing it as loud as you possibly can with all you have in this harmony. And so I went to this thing, and it sounded amazing. And of course, by towards the end of the hymn, everybody, it would be really going, and then you think, oh right, now we got it, let's do it again, sort of thing. And then I was missing the point completely. Then they would say, Brenda, which hymn would you like to sing? And it was like a community of people. And the point was not to make it perfect. And if you listen to sacred harp singing, it's not perfectly in tune. It's not perfectly structured. It's not perfectly anything. It's just got the sound of, well, when I went to Sheffield, it was 40 people or so. However many people singing their hearts out. And it's got this particular vibe. So we had this beat, which started off as a James Brown riff, actually, and then it turned into a kind of tribal beat. And then there was this acoustic guitar riff that Kerry came up, which was a bit like the theme from Deadwood. And then I'd always been interested in trying a sacred harp thing, so I found this thing online, which was it's a hymn that I really liked. I mean, it's a minor key tune. And the harmony's lovely. And so I found this from an Irish convention in 2012 that was on YouTube. And I sort of cut it up and put it in. And we always thought, maybe this is an experiment. We'll recreate it, or we'll get a different. And then we got more and more used to it, and we really liked it. So we wrote to them, said, "Can we use it?" And they basically went, "Yeah, make a donation to the Sacred Heart Foundation," which we did, and used it, and it sort of works. It was just an experiment.
It fits very well in the album. I think, like we were talking about earlier in the interview, that the album, the last few albums, they've all been great, but they all have an overriding. Each one has an overriding kind of sound and a feel to it. But this one almost feels like a greatest hits album in a way. It's like they're all different kind of tracks. It obviously sounds like the same band, but they're all different sort of styles and nuances of the same bands.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, and that's why it was actually very difficult to find an order. When we would, and I'm still not sure it's in the right order, actually. If people listening to it want to put it in a different order, feel free. we found it very difficult to put in an order that kind of flowed, because it is very eclectic. And like what you said, in a way, maybe it is all the various different eras of New Model Army put into one album. I don't know. It's very us.
That's what it struck me as. It did sound like every verse, every permutation that you could think of, as a listener of New Model Army seemed to be on that record.
I haven't spoken to many people that have listened to it, but the people that have listened to it, they all just go, "Yep, it sounds like you." You know what
Well,
I
yeah,
mean?
it
And,
always sounds like well, I
and
said just about New
maybe
Model Army.
and maybe
Everything.
having done the orchestral thing, that's kind of what we wanted to do, perhaps.
I
Yeah.
mean, you always sound like New Model Army. There's always different versions of New Model Army within the parameters of whatever New Model Army is, and this has got them all.
Okay.